Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something that's, well, frankly, a bit baffling. It's this idea of the superstar student.
Right.
You know, the ones, top grades, perfect scores. They seem to do everything right by the book.
Mm-hmm. Ticking all the boxes.
Exactly. But then they hit the real world, the job market, or try starting something themselves, and they struggle. Sometimes they even fail completely. It's a real head scratcher, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And
Huh.
it's not just, one or two people. We're basing our deep dive today on a really critical analysis called The Failure of the Superstar Student, an alarm signal in the 21st century economy.
Okay.
And our goal really is to unpack why. Why is this happening? And maybe more importantly, what does it tell us about, well, some fundamental issues in our education system, the job market, maybe even the whole economic model we're in.
Yeah, because there's this huge, sometimes really painful gap between doing well in school and actually succeeding out there. And what I found interesting in this analysis is how it pushes past just merit. Work hard, get good grades, succeed. It suggests there are bigger systemic things going on. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it. So first off, this whole idea of merit, the traditional view, the one most of us probably absorbed, is this kind of meritocratic contract.
Right, the promise.
Yeah, the promise that if you put in the effort, you excel at school, you'll get the rewards. Good job, success, effort equals outcome.
That's the story we're told.
Right.
But the paradox, the central problem we're looking at, is that even when young people do all that, follow all the rules, nail the mandates of success, they're hitting a wall. Frustration, underemployment, sometimes just no job at all.
The equation isn't working like it used to.
It really isn't.
And one really interesting factor the analysis points to is something it calls educational inflation. It's a bit counterintuitive.
Okay, inflation. How does that work with education?
Well, think about it. More and more people are going to university, getting degrees, which is great in one sense, but it also means that having a degree, any degree, doesn't make you stand out as much anymore.
Ah, so the value gets diluted in a way.
Exactly. It's become less of a unique differentiator in the job market.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily that golden ticket it might have been, say, 30 or 40 years ago.
That makes sense. And it's not just the sheer number of degrees, right? The analysis also talks about context blindness. What's that about?
Right, context blindness. This is basically about how the traditional school system often fails to see or value things beyond pure academic scores.
Like what sort of thing?
Like your background, socioeconomic status, your personal networks, even cultural capital. These invisible factors, as the analysis calls them, often play a huge role in real-world success, but they're kind of swept under the rug in purely academic settings.
So you can be brilliant academically, but if you don't have those networks or that background.
You might still struggle, yeah.
Yeah.
It suggests that merit, as defined purely by grades, isn't the whole picture. Not even close, sometimes.
Which really leads us straight into the next big point.
Huh.
This mismatch between education and the actual economy.
Precisely, the education-economy mismatch. The analysis argues that a lot of our education systems are still stuck in what it calls industrial paradigms.
Meaning they're set up for an old way of working.
Kind of, yeah. Designed for a world of maybe more stable, hierarchical jobs, factory line thinking almost.
Yeah.
But the economy today, it's digital, it's automated, knowledge is decentralized, things change incredibly fast.
It's a completely different landscape.
Totally. And universities often haven't caught up. This creates a massive skills gap.
Okay, so what specific skills are missing?
Well, the analysis points to things that are critical now. Data analysis, understanding AI, entrepreneurship, sustainability, literacy. These aren't like niche extras anymore. For many jobs, they're core.
Right, they're foundational now.
Yeah, and yet often not taught effectively, or sometimes not at all.
And it's not just the technical or hard skills either, is it? The analysis really hammers home the importance of soft skills.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Things like leadership, how well you communicate, resilience, bouncing back from setbacks, adaptability.
You can have a PhD, but if you can't work well in a team or handle unexpected changes.
You're at a serious disadvantage. The modern workplace demands that flexibility, that ability to navigate complex situations and people. And again, these often aren't explicitly taught or valued enough in traditional academia.
It's almost like we train people for a test, but not for the real game.
That's a good way to put it. And this ties directly into the next issue. The whole nature of work itself is changing. The crisis of traditional work.
What does that crisis look like?
Well, the core idea is that the old norm, you get a degree, you find a stable, well-paid job in that field, and you stay there
Yeah.
That's just not the reality for many people anymore.
That's a tough pill to swallow, especially if you followed the old script.
It really is. The analysis talks about precarization. It sounds academic, but it just means work becoming more unstable, more insecure.
So even if you are successful by some measures, you might be juggling temporary contracts, working freelance without benefits, maybe underemployed.
Exactly. That sense of security, that stable career path linked to your degree, it's eroding for a lot of professions.
Yeah.
Like you ran the race, got the medal, but the prize changed
Yeah, the goalposts moved.
massively. And this instability, interestingly, pushes a lot of young people towards things like the gig economy or trying to start their own businesses.
Often because they have to, right? Not always out of choice.
Often out of necessity, yeah.
Hmm.
But here's the kicker. They're often thrown into that world without the right tools, without strong support networks, sometimes without even basic business sense.
Which brings us neatly to another huge gap the analysis identifies: the absence of economic and strategic education.
Yeah, this one's pretty striking. You can have students who are absolutely brilliant, top of their class in complex subjects, but they stumble because they lack basic tools for making smart decisions in the real world.
Like financial literacy.
Exactly. It's kind of amazing how little practical financial education most people get. How to manage money, basic investing principles, what it takes to even start a small business.
It seems so fundamental for just adulting, really, not just for entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. It affects personal finance, career choices, everything. And it's largely missing from curricula.
And tied to that, the analysis points to weak vocational guidance.
Mm-hmm. Basically, the career advice students get is often outdated or doesn't really give them a clear picture of where the actual opportunities are now.
It's like using an old map for a city that's been rebuilt.
That's a great analogy. They're told to find a job, but the map doesn't show the new roads or the areas that are actually booming. It doesn't reflect the reality of today's job market.
So when you put all these pieces together, the diluted degree value, the context blindness, the skills gap, the changing nature of work, the lack of financial or strategic know-how.
It paints a pretty clear picture, and it leads to the central argument of the analysis. This isn't about individual students failing. It's failure as a systemic symptom.
Right. When the supposedly best students, the ones who did everything they were told, are struggling en masse, the problem isn't just them. It's not their fault, not a lack of talent or effort.
Precisely. The analysis frames it as a structural alarm signal. It's the system flashing red, telling us something is fundamentally broken in the connections between education, the economy, and what we value as success.
It forces a serious look at how we're preparing young people, or perhaps how we're not preparing them.
Exactly. So a key takeaway here is the collapse of the meritocratic contract, that promise we talked about earlier. Effort in school automatically equals success later. It's breaking down. It's just not a reliable guarantee anymore.
So for you listening, this means the game has changed. What's needed now is different. The analysis stresses that today's economy demands a whole new set of competencies.
Yeah, it's not enough to just be academically smart. Success now seems to require this blend. Talent, yes, but also financial savvy, strong social skills, being really adaptable. It's much more strategic.
It sounds like a call for some pretty major reforms then.
Absolutely. Reforming both education and economic policies. We need to bridge that gap between what schools teach and what the world actually needs right now. It's about creating better alignment.
And the analysis makes another crucial point. Talent needs help to flourish. It's not just about individual brilliance or grit.
Right. It needs a supportive ecosystem. That means things like strong networks, government policies that actively help young people, inclusive structures. Talent alone in a vacuum or a hostile environment might just wither.
So what are the concrete suggestions? What does the analysis propose we actually do?
Well, it breaks it down for different groups. For governments, the focus should be on overhauling education for those 21st century schools we mentioned, and also creating real incentives for youth employment and entrepreneurship, being proactive, not passive.
Okay, and what about universities?
Big changes needed there too. Update the curriculum, seriously integrate critical thinking, tech skills, innovation, and yes, practical financial education. And massively improve career guidance so it reflects today's reality. Prepare students for the world as it is.
Not as it was 20 years ago.
Exactly. And interestingly, there's a message for students and families too.
Which is?
Shift the focus. Don't just obsess over grades. Think about building a whole package of skills, technical, soft, strategic. Embrace continuous learning. Be proactive. Diversify what you can do. build that adaptable toolkit.
And finally, for society as a whole.
We need to move past seeing grades as the be-all and end-all measure of a person's worth or potential. We need to understand that talent requires the right environment, the right conditions, that whole ecosystem to actually thrive.
So wrapping this up, the core insight seems to be that when these superstar students falter, it's not a bug, it's a feature. It's a symptom showing us how much the world has changed and how our systems haven't kept up.
It's a really stark indicator, yeah. An urgent call for adaptation.
So here's something for you to think about. If following the old rules, get good grades, get the degree no longer guarantees success, how might you need to redefine what real preparation for the future looks like? What maybe needs to change in your own approach beyond just the classroom? What was the most surprising part of this discussion for you today? Something to mull over.